here. I don't know if we want to close the door. Okay. Well, welcome everyone to the session Feeding the Planet, where these experts here and you all are going to discuss how we can end hunger. No small task, but I know we can do it. So I'm Lauren Allognon, and I am a Data and Analytics Associate with Tetra Tech's Agriculture and Economic Growth Sector. I'm really thrilled to be here to moderate this session, and it's going to go similarly to previous sessions. Each speaker is going to have about 7 minutes to give a presentation, and then we'll have lots of time for Q&A. So please, ask questions, and yeah, we'll look forward to the discussion. So with that, we'll turn it over to Kiersten Johnson from the Famine Early Warning System, or FuseNet.
Thanks so much, Laura, and good morning, everyone. I think we're still morning, not quite afternoon yet. My name is Kiersten Johnson, and I'm here from the Famine Early Warning Systems Network Management Team at USAID in the Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance. Our program, often called FuseNet, provides early warning of acute food insecurity in countries at high risk around the world. So just to unpack that sentence a bit, if we could move, I will move one slide. There we go. All right. So first, what is acute food insecurity? It is considered a humanitarian emergency that threatens people's lives and livelihoods. What this looks like, for example, is an extremely small, very thin child who has not been able to consume enough food for several weeks or longer. And that child's life is threatened by acute food insecurity. It also looks like a farmer who has just sold his last female goat. And while the proceeds from that sale might feed his family for a few days, they no longer have access to the milk from that animal. They no longer have the opportunity to expand their herd through reproduction, for example. And so that family's livelihood is thereby threatened. And that means that life-threatening hunger may be just around the corner if humanitarian assistance is not able to reach them in time. So we at FuseNet are very concerned about food insecurity, both because it's a moral imperative to act in a humanitarian emergency, and it's also a human security concern that threatens social stability, as well as decades of progress toward development goals, like the Sustainable Development Goals. So second, what do we mean by early warning? Right now, for FuseNet, early warning means an ability to produce forecasts of acute food insecurity up to 8 months in advance, informing decision makers about how many people will be in need of emergency food assistance, where they will be, where they'll be located, how severe their needs are likely to be, and how long that severe need is likely to last. And that kind of early warning with all of the critical information that decision makers need to decide how to program, how much to program in terms of food assistance and finance. It helps them to take action before the worst effects of that acute food insecurity come to pass. And worst impact looks like famine. Okay, so, oops, let's see. To produce those forecasts, FuseNet analysts assess, integrate, and analyze data from a wide array of sector streams. As you can see highlighted on this slide, these include climate data, agricultural data, natural hazards data like flooding. These are all domains where FuseNet really relies on Earth observations for our analyses. In fact, satellite remote sensing data and agroclimatology are really at the foundation of FuseNet's 37 years of providing early warning of acute food insecurity. And you can see also highlighted there are critically important partners who provide most of that analysis. So it's multiple government agencies as well as colleagues from University of Maryland, University of California, Santa Barbara, and others, including regional partners like ICPAC in Eastern Africa. All right, and these analyses allow us to produce this kind of assessment of kind of the size and scope and severity of acute food insecurity in the countries that we cover. So with that in mind, I'd just like to highlight some of our Earth observation related priorities now that you understand kind of what our objectives are. Our priorities in this critically important space include maintaining the continuity of long history, low latency Earth observations. So these are things like temperature, NDVI, rainfall. These long historical time series data sets that are really homogeneous are critically important for us to be able to identify anomalies, in particular drought anomalies that feed into our analyses. Key work streams that we are focused on in this area right now include things like ensuring the VIIRS satellite data streams from VIIRS are robust, and the products that are generated from those data are they're seamlessly transitioned from MODIS, which is coming out of operation. We are also looking to use Sentinel-2 products, like for standard indices like NDVI or the integrated or harmonized Sentinel Landsat product that will help complement MODIS and VIIRS data streams. And then finally, we're working to leverage land data assimilation systems that will help us learn how best we can combine information from models with observations from satellites. Second area that's a priority for FuseNet, of course, is maintaining the state of the practice for our specific applications. It's an incredibly exciting time for satellites, new satellites, new data, and increasing capabilities related to computing that have really redefined the possible in this space. Recognizing that it takes time to develop robust and operations-ready products that can feed into FuseNet's analyses. Areas that we're currently exploring include improved monitoring of rangeland water points for pastoralists to water their animals through use of SAR data from the upcoming NISAR mission, determining the best rainfall product that we can obtain by exploring relationships among CHIRPS data, IMERG data, and ground observations, as well as leveraging microwave-derived vegetation indices to improve information, in particular in cloudy places like the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where the usual remote sensing methods that we use are just thwarted to a great extent. So having radar or passive microwave data here would be incredibly helpful in an extremely food insecure country. And finally, a third priority area for us is improved ground reference data collection. We need these data to train machine learning models that actually allow us to use all of the incredible satellite data that are coming in from numerous satellites right now. And in particular, we're really interested in the development of agricultural field boundary data sets. When we match those with satellite remote sensing data, that will be a game changer for enhancing food security through developing improved crop masks, improved estimates of crop yield, improved estimates of planted area, and much more. So I'd just like to close by acknowledging the fact that right now, people around the world are struggling through a global food security crisis. It's being exacerbated in an unprecedented way by climate change. And just a glance at the Eastern Horn of Africa is proof of that. Work that you do to leverage satellite data in a way that can ameliorate or prevent crises like this and the worst impacts of these crises could not be more timely or more important. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we'll have here today, as well as the work that you all will do going forward.
Thank you, Kiersten. Jawoo Koo from IFPRI is up next.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So yeah, my name is Jawoo Koo. I'm a senior research fellow at International Food Policy Research Institute based in Washington, D.C. And we are also working globally across low and middle income countries. IFRI is part of Global Agricultural Research Network called CGIAR. So I'm going to show 3 cases where we use Earth observation and satellite remote sensing-based analytics in food security research, not just at IFRI, but across CGIAR research network. The first one that I'm going to introduce is about the quality of crop production statistics data. Although there are many exciting opportunities to incorporate Earth observation and satellite data into the analytical frameworks, the official statistics data is still the basis of a lot of policy decisions and research. So for crop yield, most of the statistics data are extrapolated from the field collected data, and the gold standard method to collect those method to measure crop yield in the field is called crop cut experiment. This is really labor-intensive, logistically challenging method. It takes about 5 hours to complete one field, and there is official protocol country by country for different crops, and it's very difficult job to scale to the large scale. So for countries, usually have their own sampling frame, how and where to make those samples. And what we are trying to do in this case is improve the method, improve the sampling frame using Earth observation data to kind of optimize the location and time and amount of samples to be taken. We developed this approach in India and kind of tested in Ethiopia, and we are now trying to scale up in Mozambique with some donor support. Okay, next slide. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I should have taken. The second case is satellite measure soil moisture data. The crop insurance, index-based crop insurance usually use rainfall data. Okay, so sorry. Yes, okay, here we go. So usually index-based crop insurance product use rainfall data, and if your field is close to the rainfall station, especially reporting high quality rainfall measurement, then you're okay. But most of the cases, that's not really the situation in many of African countries. Usually one rainfall station, one weather station in Africa covers about 26,000 square kilometers. That's about having one station in the state of Maryland. Not nearly enough to give really decision actionable information, not alone for insurance products that are very critical to support the resilience of farming. So there are ways that there are many different approaches to improve that situation without necessarily improving or relying on the rainfall station. We tried to utilize or pilot it using the soil moisture data measured from different types of the radar, microwave satellite constellation. And we actually found this is more accurate and gives better results than rainfall alone. We piloted this study, this approach for 5,000 farmers in Kenya, and we are partnering with this company, Acre Africa in Kenya, in the process scaling up to 300,000 across the country. And the next slide is about the, okay, here you go. Oops. Somehow my maps are gone. I don't know what happened to that. Okay, so there were maps in this slide. I think you have to reimagine it now. So the last use case is about the monitoring food security and food supply and production in the field. There has been lots of very exciting development in this land cover data for the last couple of years, including the dynamic world that Google put out early this year. It's just revolutionary. Very much real time. I think the lack of time is about only 5 days. We have now global 10-meter resolution land cover data for 9 classes available for free, accessible through Google's engine platform and other locations. So that's really exciting. But for food security researchers like ourselves, that's not quite enough. We really wanted to disaggregate that crops aggregate class. So for example, all the cropland area in those land covered maps are just one color. That's not quite enough to understand which crops are performing better or worse. And also these are only 8-year estimate. We really want to know what's happening, the productivity and production status, even seasonality, and a lot of detailed information can be kind of leveraged from this kind of product. So we are partnering with Impact Observatory. Actually, you will see, Steve just told me he'll be presenting the same story in more depth in his rapid fire talk. So please go to that. And he will also, his team and CGIAR will partner to see how we can make the crop class more disaggregated so that we can use in food security research and policy decision making. So this is a really exciting frontier that we are quite happy about. Thanks.
Thank you, Jawoo. Next, we have Kunwar Singh from Aid Data.
My name is Kunwar Singh. I'm a geospatial scientist and an affiliate faculty at William and Mary. My research focuses on geospatial data and sciences to understand how land and vegetation dynamics impact natural resources. Recently, we approved two grants, one from Gates Foundation, one from NASA. So some of the things what I will talk about, that's related from that project, and some of also the work I focus on. So I have two graphics to share with you. One about that shows you about where water is disappearing, means how water has been used over time, and that lake what you see is Aral Sea, Kazakhstan. The second graphic what you see that is from Wadi Basin, Saudi Arabia. 20 years ago there was few farms, but now there's a huge area with farmlands. Now think about where they are getting water from. So I want to make 2 points. The first one is tracking land use changes over time. We have reached to the point where we don't have land to convert into farmland for cultivation. That means we have to rely on farmland intensification. That means we have to farm 3-4 crops or more per season. That means we will require more water. We already using more than 90% of fresh water globally. What that means? That means we will have to track these resources to allocate them in the most efficient way. But question is that how we should do. Perhaps we have to think about crop per drop. What that means is we need to produce more crop per drop, whether financially or yield-wise. So that's the first point. Second point is considering taking geospatial impact evaluation into the consideration. What that means is that in developing countries, a lot of organizations, they make investment either for food or land or water resources like irrigation infrastructures. And now, very recently, in last 7 to 8 years, we have started doing impact evaluation to understand how that investment has impacted the local communities. What if we have that consideration before even we do the investment to understand how that has contributed to or will shape the community over time? What that means is that all the outcomes we will have with this in one synergistic approach that can inform implementer organizations more efficient ways. So to conclude, my point is that in order to do that, we have to combine few things: Earth observation data, climate data, and impact evaluation skills. Since yesterday, all of you just heard about all the satellites, all the data. It's easy to say that there's a lot of data, but are those data the same? Quality or the outcome we have from them are the same? Can we consider them into analysis? That's one. As Jawoo just said, that there's one weather station that covers huge area. Is that sufficient to do the impact evaluation under changing climate scenario? Perhaps not. What we can do, that's the quest, and that's my second point. Thank you.
Thank you, Kunwar. Next, we have Anu Swatantran from Corteva.
Thanks. Do you mind if I get off the chair? So I was sitting for an hour in Uber to get here, and I just feel like I need some movement now. But the ride in the Uber demonstrates the impact of geospatial and remote sensing technologies. Just having it at the click of a button and planning your trip, knowing when you're going to get here, I was really amazed to see how far we have come since we started using geospatial technologies years ago. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about food, about farming, about mapping. So I'll go all over the place a little bit. Maybe before that, a show of hands on how many people have lived on farms, have grown on a farm, or worked on a farm. That's great. That's great. I did not for a very long time, but I know my grandfather had a paddy field, many paddy fields in southern India back in the 1950s. And he was a data scientist in his own right, because he knew how to observe weather, how to observe soil, how to use all of this information to make the right plantations. And he learned about machines that were the technology that was growing in the outside of India, and how he can use it. And forming co-ops to maximize yield and improve income and livelihoods for farmers around him. So he was doing all of these analytics without any data, because there were no satellites at that time. But he was a data scientist in his own right. And then fast forward to 1972 or 71, when the corn leaf blight happened in the US. And this was because of monoculture. One variety of corn got infected, and it was devastating, spread across the entire US. And if you look at it today, it's probably $1 billion worth of loss. And that's what triggered the satellite mapping program in the US, because they wanted to know what is happening, how is disease spreading, how can we map it. So we had, there were airborne mapping missions. And then that went ahead with the launch of Landsat, the longest satellite record that we have today. So that's where this journey started. And then fast forward, we have so many satellites out there from NASA, from ESA, in the public domain, as well as in the commercial satellite imaging space, where the resolutions are getting finer and finer, the temporal frequency is improving. And that really impacts what we do in mapping Earth ecosystems and agriculture. And where do I come into this? I started my career long ago in India, literally mapping out from topo sheets, digitizing topography and making digital elevation models and things like that long back. For anybody who knows those software, Idrisi, Geomatica, and Erdas, and so on. And then I had this opportunity to work at the University of Maryland as a researcher and scientist on LiDAR missions, on fusing LiDAR, radar, and multispectral, hyperspectral data to answer questions related to Earth ecosystem structure. Like, how can we map forests better? How can we map forest dynamics and carbon sequestration? And I contributed a lot to the JEDI mission. I don't know how many of you have heard of it. If you haven't, please Google it. And there is a Save JEDI petition that's out there, because we really need these observations for both forest as well as agriculture. And that's where I did a lot of work for the last more than 10 years. And then at some point, I felt there was a need to diversify and to learn from other ecosystems and other areas. And so I joined this company called DuPont Pioneer, which was Pioneer at that time. Pioneer was started in the 1930s by Henry Wallace, who was vice president of the US at one of these, don't remember the year, but in the 80s. But he was a big proponent of hybrid corn, and there is a lot of debate. I'm not going to go around that debate of what kind of cropping systems we should be using, and organic versus conventional. But there has been a wealth of research in Pioneer on the different kinds of hybrids of corn, of soybean, of cotton, sunflower, and how we can improve yields, how we can intensify productivity, how we can improve income and livelihoods for farmers. The company has a very close relationship with the farmer, and that's a different perspective from what we typically do with satellite imagery. We look at it top down from space. We map things and we say, this is your field and this is what we are seeing over time. What they do at Pioneer, that now became Corteva, is developing a relationship with the farmer through agronomists, through CSAs, and understanding what are their pain points, what do they really need, and then come back and see, can we solve those questions with satellite imagery? So it's a really a complementary effort to all the talks that we have heard thus far. And I lead the satellite remote sensing research efforts at Corteva. It's in the R&D, which is a 5,000 scientist strong group with really cool work on soils, on nutrients in the farm, on improving productivity. So what we do is we use all kinds of satellite imagery to know where is the field, the boundary, starting right there, and then what kind of crop was planted today, yesterday, many years back. How do things change, crop rotation? How is the productivity of the land and how has it been changing? How do you manage resources very well? So all of these are happening at scale in Corteva as well as many other companies. And we have started using satellite data a lot in the last 5 to 10 years. And I bring my perspective from academia on making things more sustainable, on how can we make less use of fertilizers, how can we have the see and spray systems where we don't have to use a lot. How can we reduce the use of water by knowing evapotranspiration much better? And how do we improve public-private partnerships to do this? And I really am a big proponent of that because I've seen both sides. And we do have partnerships with a lot of groups because Corteva is a global company, even though it's based in the US. It is operational in about 130 countries. And in every continent, there are partnerships with USAID, so we should probably talk again more about it. There are partnerships with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We have partnerships. I am also a collaborator with NASA Harvest and Stanford University. So we continue to build our partnerships with the public sector to see how we can leverage knowledge from both sides. One of the information that we do have is grower data, and I know that will probably come up. We have access to that because of that relationship with the grower, and that is so important in improving our models. And do I have more time? So maybe a little more about what happens. It's not only about using satellite imagery to map things or give recommendations. It's also about knowing what is happening there. So what happens at Corteva is giving the farmer a holistic solution per acre. What kind of product is the best for a given area? What kind of rice variety would require less water, especially in APAC, in Asia Pacific? What kind of solutions can we provide to smallholder farmers?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anu. And thank you so much to our panelists. It's really interesting to hear a different perspective. All four of you come from kind of a different background, although everybody's kind of working toward the same goal here. So we're going to go ahead and start with some questions. I have a couple questions, but I would also love to hear from the audience. So we're going to start with this question around a kind of user-driven design, human-centered design, kind of every kind of jargony word that you can fill in the gap there. Throughout this conference, yesterday this was brought up in a lot of the discussions and today as well. And actually Hamad from Radiant Earth said something great. He said, who are the problem owners? And so my question for you all is, when we're thinking about, the agriculture and food security, sectors, specifically in emerging economies, who are the most important problem owners that we can really work with in these sectors to help increase the use of derived analytics from Earth observation or remote sensing, those insights to increase, food security and improve agriculture outcomes. So whoever wants to go first can jump in. Jawoo, you look like you're eager to answer this question. Go ahead.
Go first. So in our case, the policymakers in government, it's not just Minister of Agriculture, it could be Minister of Finance, Minister of Disaster, or Climate, and all the people who are making food security relevant decisions. And what I have been seeing is that the same approach, the human-centered design principle, can be very much applied for that. And this is also quite difficult group of stakeholders because we don't clearly know when and how they make decisions and how much kind of agility they have to correct those decisions when it's not proven to be effective. We had a case in one of the Southern African countries in 2015-16. That was the time when El Nino was really strong, and all the FuseNet, including FuseNet, all the early warning system has been giving really strong warning that drought will be terrible, it will be historic. Countries really need to prepare for that. And that message really propagated through all these government agencies and ended up preemptively placing export ban of the crop production. What really happened in that particular country was that they actually had pretty good season and pretty good rain. So the drought, that large-scale drought that everyone was worried about, didn't happen. And at the end, what happened was they had a surplus of crops, flooded market, but farmers couldn't sell to neighboring countries, that ended up increasing poverty and actually degraded economic status. But what was really sad is government was looking at it, and they had not only early warning system, they also had monitoring information, but just didn't know what to do. I think there are very strong early warning system, but we don't necessarily have the same level of strong kind of advisory services, kind of advising government what to do about those new information. So I think that's also quite important message for us, the policy researchers.
So I will add what Jawoo said too. There are so many key players, and with competing interests, it's hard to pinpoint who is the problem owners. But yes, I think there need to be a system that can create policies more dynamic, means they can include any changes that are happening in the ground to their system and come up with a policy that can help to change system. I will give you an example. Cranberry farming in Massachusetts. A lot of farmers, they're retiring their cranberry farms because there's more yield and then low economic productivity. So, and now there's three key players. Well, there's many more, but I can point three. Farmers, they want to minimize their loss. So that means they're retiring. Then developers, land use developers, they want to use that cranberry bogs and they want to develop into neighbor buildings, developed users. And then obviously state and federal government that they want to invest money so that they can convert those cranberry bogs into natural wetlands. Now, the state and federal government, they don't have enough resources to buy those retired bogs and convert into natural wetlands. So that's their limitations. Farmers, they want to maintain their livelihood one way or other ways. And then developers, they want to profit from it. And we basically, it's not they only want to profit, we also want to have a place to live. So how to bring all these key players in a way that they have more sustainable way of and dynamic way to make decisions so that that can come to the ground and make a system more sustainable for long term, particularly when climate is changing in a way that if we don't continue with the same pace, we might lose that point. So this is one example, and another example in a sub-Saharan African country where they have more dams, means in order so they can store water for irrigation. But those dams, they are earthy dams. So what happens whenever it rains? Soil erosion brings more silt and clay, and it chokes those dams. And over time, those dams become useless. Now, it's impossible for organizations outside to keep investing and maintaining those reservoirs for water. If there could be a system that can monitor and develop policies that can implement and keep restoring those reservoirs, that can certainly provide water in a sustainable way for a longer period. So that's a second example. So that means there are multiple key players. We have to bring them all on the same table to make it policy more dynamic.
Just acknowledging, the concept of having multiple stakeholders, multiple key players is very true. When you come to the question of who are the problem owners, I think when it comes to food production and food security in the countries where we work, in developing countries where smallholder farmers are predominant, I think the ultimate problem holders are the folks who are trying to grow enough food to eat. And so I think at USAID, one of the questions or one of the ways of working that's really important to us is how do we partner with local communities in gathering data and analyzing the data? How can we, I see one of our Youth Mapper colleagues from the Geo Center who works a lot on Youth Mappers. This is a USAID program that works with young people on activities that, for example, there's one in development right now where we're talking about having young people, these are university students, go out to help map areas that will help inform, help populate a ground-referenced data set that will then help inform machine learning models. But it's not just for collecting data, analyzing the data as well, understanding the problems that will be solved with these data, and then finding a way to feed back that information and that analysis to the communities from which the data came. If we can perfect that virtuous cycle, I think that's one way that we can leverage the satellite data for the good of the ultimate problem holders who we're working to support here. Thanks.
Absolutely, thank you. Anu, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I would second Kiersten, that the problem owner is the person who's trying to grow food, and really supporting them in the best possible way is the way to get to food security. But at the same time, there are a lot of key players, and we could do this much for a farmer, but we cannot get beyond that if there are policies that limit us. And I think that is very true in smallholder agriculture. There are still a lot of limitations where we are not able to break that barrier. So we need a mix of solutions.
Great, thank you. That's actually a great segue into kind of my next question, which is on inclusivity and barriers. There's a significant kind of power and a political economy in developing markets for people who have access to Earth observation data and the insights that we can all glean from it, as compared to those who do not, who likely are those smallholder farmers, and small, medium enterprises even. For example, large agribusinesses, commodity traders can use this information to really strengthen their own, market position. Whereas those who don't have access, which could include, governments at all levels, like I said, SMEs, universities, and then of course the small scale producers who don't benefit from the same information. You guys kind of touched on this question a little bit, but how can we better address this inequity in access to this information. And this was brought up in some sessions yesterday. You guys mentioned public-private partnerships, but if any of you want to expand a little bit more on, how can we get this information into, the hands of people who can actually make decisions on it without just sending them a raw satellite, image.
I would like to say some few things. Have you ever heard that there was a course, session, or things about how to use Google Map? But all of us, means we all use Google Map every day to commute to identify a place where we have to go. What that means is having product that is user-friendly, intuitive, not to take a course on and to have a whole lot of a study to make that worthwhile. I think that's where we have to put effort into that. Bringing any product which is intuitive, means user-friendly enough that any level of person with any level of knowledge can use as efficiently as a skilled person. And Google Map is one of the best examples. If you go, no matter what part of the world, everybody uses Google Map, and without learning, attending any course. That's
So, this is also very important and difficult question. So I had another sad story. I seem to have many sad stories. So we were approached by one of the government in North Africa, has agriculture, has been investing a lot in agriculture. They wanted to see if they can take advantage of super high fine resolution of commercial satellite just launched. It was like about 2 to 3 years ago. So we kind of acted as intermediary to the company, and we kind of scope out which area is important. It became like a 3 district in the country, and we asked the company what it will take for the government to access the information so that they can make better food security monitoring and decision. The price quote they got was astronomical. So it exceeded the agricultural GDP of those 3 districts just for annual basis. So they just had to quickly abandon and look for other ways to collect the data. So it kind of demonstrated how, as Lauren, you just said, how difficult it is for many of the stakeholders who can really benefit from these data scarce environments are not still able to access those information, the timely information. A lot of cases, they have to partner with organizations like us, or many of you are also playing the role, which is very critical, to get that information, which is fine. But I think at some point that they really need to be able to do that internally. They have to be able to access the information and make the decision internally for their own food security goals. But again, I know it's a lot easy to say for me to in this kind of venue, but it's very difficult for companies and commercial providers to make that arrangement. So
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to move on to the next question, and I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this, and maybe each of you can kind of address it, how your own organization deals with this issue of data privacy and transparency and who owns all of this information that you're collecting. For example, we've heard a lot about ML training data, right? I assume a lot of this is, a lot of it is farmer fields, whether or not, do we have the right to look at a farmer's field and map it out and use it for our algorithms. So I would love to hear kind of how you each deal with this issue in your own work, as we have identified from the first question that our problem owner in this context of agriculture and food security is a small-scale producer or a smallholder farmer who may or may not know that their data is being used, in certain ways. So if you guys, Kiersten, if you want to start.
Sure. So before I joined the FuseNet management team at USAID, I was in the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security, and we were doing a lot of primary data collection, household surveys linked to kind of agricultural surveys. In these surveys, part of the data collection included going out to farmers' fields, walking the plot perimeter, saving that information, and then connecting it to the households' reported information on what they're growing, how they're cultivating it, how they're managing their plots. And then obviously that could be linked to satellite remote sensing data. Figuring out how to manage and protect those data, keeping the plot polygons separate from the household information, which has to be absolutely private, was a real, we had an extensive and ironclad protocol on how to manage the data that they were kept on, not attached to the internet, and all of these protections because of these very concerns. So if it's not connected to individual information, I think the question is, it's harder to answer, but and I think it's very much open for interpretation. But in terms of kind of how we manage the data practically, it's something that's taken very, very seriously, and at the same time that doesn't allow us to feed into necessarily ground referenced data repositories like the Radiant Earth Foundation or ECAS, which is doing a lot of great work here. And that is the kind of work that will really allow us to develop machine learning models that we're all seeking to develop. So I think this is a great question. And then when it comes back to transparency and who owns the data, the extent to which, again, we can feed those data back into communities, I think could benefit those folks. And I think, again, collecting the data from the individual farmers, that all requires permission when you're doing it in association with a survey, consent, informed consent, and all of this. I'd be very interested to hear from others more about kind of if you're not linking it to a survey that requires informed consent in order to proceed with data collection. Really interested in hearing discussions around kind of how people are managing that issue.
I can add a little bit to that. And I think I'll emphasize very seriously, because Kotava also takes privacy of the farmers' data very seriously. And to some, it's so serious that sometimes it becomes painful to have public-private partnerships, because it is difficult to cross that barrier and share data. But over the last few years, we've been really finding solutions to this, because we realize that there is a need for those data points for training ML models. There is a need to share and expand our training data set and validation data set across regions. And that's not only a need for an agribusiness company or anybody, it's a need for food security. So I think that awareness is increasing a lot. And one of the things that we do to that extent is anonymizing. We have been anonymizing data a lot, but nothing happens without the farmer's consent. The farmer's consent is number one in the way we use their data. At some point, we agree that the locations will be anonymized, but some of the data sets can go into training a machine learning model, which can then be aggregated at a very coarse resolution to be provided in an open source fashion. And then we also publish. Publication is another way that we share information. So there are a lot of publications that we've had on yield prediction, on large-scale crop mapping, and so on. And that's how we do it. The best way we can share information with everybody is through a publication.
So yeah, in our case, just as an ethical thing for researchers to do, we only collect data when it's really necessary. We don't need to have all the nitty-gritty details of how farmers grow their crops. For example, the crop field boundary, I know there are a lot of applications and innovations are happening around the boundary detection, but in reality, we don't really need exact kind of area boundary. And even in African context, even if you collect very definite boundary this year, there's no guarantee that it will stay like that next year and after. So yeah, what's more important is where what kinds are grown, even at a bit coarse resolution. That can still provide a lot of important information for the policymaker and decision maker level. Of course, the story is completely different if farmers want their field to be digitized and tracked through like an insurance product and things like that. That's a different story. But as a researcher, have an interest in monitoring the agricultural food production system in particular country. I think we don't have to go through really fine resolution and trying to monitor and understand everything. We should just based on what kind of policy decisions that we are trying to have and what level of detail is good enough to provide as an input to the decision making processes.
My experience is same as Kiersten, Anu, and Jawoo's, that we follow very strict protocol to maintain the privacy. Yes, and that sometimes also gives us trouble that it doesn't allow us to share with the partner unless we have shared approval, IRB approval. That also hinders progress on a project. It happened many times. And in fact, in one project, I had to wait for 2 years, and at the end, I abandoned the project. But there are always workaround. Means there is a way around to make it happen. So these means now to save time, I just develop models based on the data available. It's at least some basic understanding I can get based on the data available, and then wait for the surveys done. But yes, there's issues, and I'm not sure there what would be the easiest possible way to circumvent and come up with a unique solution. So I think that's the problem with the household survey.
Sure. And one quick addition there, and I know Hamid and we had talked a lot before. I don't know what's happening right now. It's been a while, but a company like Radiant Earth is really well positioned to do such things, where you have a platform where you can submit data from different organizations, and it's held in one place, or a blockchain, maybe down the line, a blockchain method, where everybody owns their own data, but you put it on that system, and then that gets shared for a common model. So that could be a potential solution down the line. It's not there yet, but sometime down the line.
Absolutely. I have one final, this is going to be a rapid fire question because I think we are at time. So just, and I know we have questions in the audience, please, I don't know if you guys can stick around and, we can ask or respond to more, but just rapid fire, this kind of is part of the prompt of this session is, what big bets do we need to make as an EO community between now and 2030 to end hunger? If you had one solution to really invest in, what would it be? Very quickly.
Okay, this is not from an ending food insecurity, but for emergency food insecurity. Again, we are in a world where the needs for emergency assistance far outstrip the available humanitarian resources to respond. And I don't think it's, you can't overstate the level of crisis that we're currently in, and looking at the state of climate change going forward, it's really hard to be optimistic in the immediate future. So what can we do to make the resources that we have stretch as far as possible? Being able to be as specific as possible and as granular as possible in understanding, what crops are being grown, how much are grown, what's the productivity likely to look like, likely to be, locally and then globally, because we've got a very tightly interconnected global food market, is really critical to being able to understand exactly how much resources need to go to the people whose lives are about to be lost, and not have any unnecessary, non-critical overflow. And from our part, we really do feel like having a routinely updated, it may be a dream for now, but field boundary data set that will allow us to have very precise understanding of agricultural production, that would be a big bet. That would really help from our perspective.
Absolutely. Jawoo?
Yeah, adding to that, I've been thinking a lot about this, what will really unleash all this innovation to cover everywhere. I think rural internet and rural connectivity is still one of the things everyone's kind of take it for granted in developed world, like in the US, like we are here, but yeah, it's really hard. So we don't hear, we don't see, we don't really connect with a lot of people who are producing food because the rural area where production is happening is not really connected. So I think that's where it's one of the SDG and not many people really realize. So the rural connectivity, internet for everyone, I think that will probably be really instrumental to unlock a lot of technology innovation targeting those areas currently not being covered.
I think we need to focus on geographies and their needs. Needs for every geography are so different than the place we are living right now. What that means is that countries, for example, I will give you an example about India. They have food reserve for 2 or 3 years. That means since 1970s, I think we haven't seen that issue where we have food shortage. What that means is that there are food reserves that they can supply on their needs. What that means is that if we can do something similar, understand the needs of geographies, countries, location, we can do a better job. That means we need to understand what they need, what they want.
I'd say it is precision ag, precision AI, because we do need to intensify yields and know how much to produce and how to reduce our resources. And precision ag will really help with that. And satellite imagery play a big role.
Absolutely. Those are some great big bets. And maybe next year we're going to hear some solutions based on, some of these ideas. So thank you all for attending the session. And thank you to our panel. And have a good rest of the conference.